This is Brian Ankney with AutoSuccess magazine. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Today, my guest, Cory Mosley, is going to talk to you about 3 major problems that cost dealers sales online and how to fix them. A couple of things I want to cover before we get started with the webinar. First of all, I have a great announcement to make. AutoSuccess has joined the Babcock's Media family. We are now one of over 75 printed, digital, and newsletter publications that go out to the automotive space through Babcock's Media. With joining that team, we have a wealth of new options. Our technology is going to explode in a way that most of you that have followed AutoSuccess for a long time have probably never seen. It's really exciting. We really hope that this will help us deliver better information to you. Now, questions. The questions is the trickiest part of a webinar for attendees, because depending on what type of device you use, it works different for all of you. If you are on a laptop, a desktop, or a tablet, very easy. There's a pane that goes down the right side of your screen. You'll see questions near the bottom. If you hit the plus sign, it'll open up a box. You type in your question, hit enter, the question goes, and you never actually leave the webinar screen. So it's very simple and easy to do. Now we'll get to the more trickier devices. Whether you're on an Android or an Apple, if you're on a mobile device, it's going to work different. Depending on the manufacturer of your Android device, it could also work different. And so somewhere on your screen, you're either going to have a header, a footer, both, or a picture frame. Somewhere in that, you'll see a question mark. You click the question mark. Now, it's going to take you away from the webinar. You'll still be able to hear it, but you won't be able to see it. You type in your question, and then depending on your device, you can either swipe to get rid of the question screen so where you can see the webinar again, or you might have to you'll have to locate the icon that looks like a flat screen monitor. It'll also be in the header, the footer, or the picture frame. You click that, it'll take you back to the webinar. Now, this happens to people sometimes. I've had some emails about it, so I'd like to tell people about it now. If for some reason while you're asking a question, you hit the wrong thing and it kicks you out of the webinar, don't worry. The same link that brought you here today and the same phone number you dialed in on, or if you're using your computer's audio, it will also just use the same link, the same phone number, and you'll come right back into the webinar. Now, I invite you to ask the questions as we go through the webinar for a couple reasons. One, I like to have some great questions to go into right at the end of the presentation, but also it'll help me with context. You know, as I'll note when the question came in and what screen we were on, and that way, if Cory's not particularly clear about what you're asking, I might be able to help a little bit. Now, one last thing before I hand this over to Cory. If you have not yet, please join AutoSuccess Webinars. It's a group on Facebook, and when you join, you just type in AutoSuccess Webinars in Facebook search bar, hit search, it'll bring it up, and then ask to join. I will add you to the group. In the group, you are welcome to interact with our speakers, with AutoSuccess staff, suggest topics you'd like to see, suggest speakers you'd like to see. And most importantly, I invite you to interact with each other, because every AutoSuccess webinar, you're going to finish with a page, 2 pages, or more of notes with lots of steps that you're going to try to implement to improve your dealership. Well, you're going to have successes and failures along the way, and I invite you to share those with each other in AutoSuccess webinars. If you have a great idea that worked great for you, it's likely to work great for somebody else. And maybe somebody else's failure is a pitfall you might be able to avoid. So please utilize AutoSuccess webinars. With all that being said, I would like to hand the floor to Cory. Cory, please take it away, my friend.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody that's given your time this afternoon. I know we just closed out March, so people are looking ahead to April. We've taken all the chips off the board. We've wiped the marker board, and now it's as I like to say, one big Janet Jackson song from the 80s. What have you done for me lately? So I know everybody's thinking about April, and I think this is a great time as we get into April to start to look at some things that I want to share with you today. So, when we talk about the 3 major problems that cost dealers sales online, this really comes from kind of our overall background and approach to the market. If I see people are still hopping on, if you are new to me, what I wanted to share with you, and the main thing I want to share with you early on, is my approach comes from having been in the chair. So if you're an internet manager, a BDC manager, BDC director, internet director, this is kind of where I come from in the marketplace. So worked on the sales floor, worked in management, but this was born out of that idea. So if you can't guess, if you've never seen me before, or you didn't see the promo pic to sign up for the webinar, I'm the guy in the middle, and I'm sure you probably agree I haven't aged a day. But as you can see there, the perspective is some throwback. Somebody's wearing that's the official Toyota golf shirt. Back then, I know somebody's got on their golf shirt right now, depending on where you're located. We've got the pagers on our hips there because we were a BDC, so we took the incoming phone calls, worked the internet leads. So the process has kind of come from obviously doing the job, but then now spending the last 13 years working, with dealers across. I matured a little bit as I went into the Highline marketplace. So during my time at Lexus, we had to now put on ties there. But I'm sharing this with you simply to give you context that these strategies aren't academic. These problems and opportunities that I'm sharing with you aren't academic. They're tactical, they're strategic, and they're real. And your dealership may or may not be, guilty of a few of these things, but now is the opportunity to take a proactive approach to correcting it. So I always like to set the table there, because in our business, the first thing the first concern that typically pops up is, hey, why should I listen to you? How do I know that you have any idea what you're talking about, and have you ever done my job? So we've been fortunate enough to work with manufacturers, dealers, dealer associations, so really run the gamut on who we've worked with and where we get our information from and where our strategies have come from, really working with dealers. So let me share these with you. I'm going to go quickly. We wanted to have questions, as Brian said, based on their format. If questions pop in, we'll shoot them in, and we'll try to get them answered also, beginning in at any point in time. I'm perfectly comfortable taking the questions. But let's kind of start with number one. And what I want you to consider is, when I talk about the idea of broken processes, we're very process-driven, or we say we are, right? We measure this, we count this, we look at our CRMs for certain things to happen, but it really is the broken idea of the process. And the dangerous thing, and my take on process is a little different than other people's. And what I mean by that is, I'm fearful for you of the things that we think are good processes that really aren't. The internal aspects of how sometimes a process gets created in a store. When managers get together in a room and say, hey, what should we do? They say, how should we go about doing this? What's a good idea? And it's not necessarily derived around the customer experience or the user experience for the customer. It's more an internal conversation about how we should do something. So let me share an example with you. My wife and I, this is a real email. My wife and I, back in October, were looking to add a kind of commuter car, around town kind of car. So we took some interest, and we reached out to some local Honda dealers. Now, obviously, being in the training field, presentation field, and working with dealers, the easy thing to do, right, is just to call up a dealer, a Honda dealer we work with, and say, hey, I need a car, send me an invoice, but that's not a learning experience. So I like to create learning experiences and examples for webinars such as this. So what we looked at was, we went shopping as an internet customer would, by going on a website, submitting information, and what I'm sharing with you is a real live autoresponder. The only thing I removed was the telephone number, and obviously the dealer. I don't need to embarrass the internet manager or embarrass the dealership. Although by sending this communication out to 300, 400, 500, 600 leads a month, they're doing their own work for themselves in terms of how customers are perceiving them. So this is the real life autoresponder that came back from the email. It's got my wife's name there, and you can read it on the screen, but thanks so much for your interest in the 2017 Honda Civic hatchback. I'm tied up right now with a customer, but I wanted to let you know that I did get your request. I'll be calling you shortly as soon as I free up. So here's what's dangerous, and I know many of you on the call are reading this like, man, why would somebody send something like that? Or, this is the interesting part, or somebody's reading this going, what's wrong with that? And that's the challenge. Because in their mind, this is going out to several hundred customers. What was this internet manager trying to accomplish? He was trying to do a lead confirmation, right? Number one. Number two, He was explaining to me why I would not be getting the information I requested because he's tied up. But he wanted to confirm the request, and he was going to let me know that he'd be calling me as soon as he is free. So this has kind of all the makings. You can probably see if you dig a little deeper and take a step back here, this has all the makings of a problematic email communication. Because really what it's saying to the customer is, I'm busy, I don't really have time for you, and I'll get to you as soon as I can, or as convenient as it is for me. So of course, in the customer world, in the world where in my city, in Virginia, we've got about 5 Honda dealerships that I can get to in 30 minutes. I see some of the people on this call. I recognize some of the names. I know your markets. Many of you are in major metros and markets where it is just as competitive. So what are the chances that I'm simply going to move on to the next dealer? The irony here is not only did he really not follow up, he didn't even call. Now, here's where the problem is created in the process. Somebody approved this email. Somebody said this was okay to do that, number two. Number three, we don't have an indicator of how many people don't do business with that store because of this initial message. People who are turned off, going the other direction. That's the next thing that happens. Now, the challenge here is this store, this particular store is part of a group, and this group is supposedly very successful, and they have good numbers with Honda and are well known within Honda. So what do you do with that? How do you now explain that idea is a broken process? So that's why it's important to not simply live in the picture. As the saying goes, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. And process challenges like initial communications to a customer are so significant. And we see thousands of them. We conduct mystery shops on behalf of a few manufacturers. So we're literally looking at thousands of mystery shops at a time. And the amount of first impressions that are created as challenges is really surprising to me as we go into 2017. Our first workshop and education piece on internet sales was in 2004, 2005. So to see that we still have some of these challenges is concerning. Now you may say, oh, Cory, I don't have a problem. Our autoresponder is beautiful. That's great. The next question is going to be, what becomes the logical strategy? So how do you actually move a prospect? And when I talk about moving a prospect, I'm talking about the largest group of customers. I often get that question, oh, well, how do I sell the guy that won't do X, Y, and Z and only wants to do this, that, and the other? That's not where your greatest opportunity to grow business is, in getting granular to the one-off customer who's extremely difficult or challenging, or sends out 26 emails to every dealer about how do you need the bottom line price at 5 o'clock. What I'm after is the customers that we're missing purely for reasons that we're not thinking through the large scale of our engagement. Because we remember unique experiences. If I was in front of you now and we were doing a live workshop, I'd ask you a question like, what's the best party you've ever been to in your life? And psychologically, how we think, we think in experiences best and worst is our typical default. So if I said, what's the best party you ever been to in your life? You could go there. You could think about it right now. Oh, man, here's what happened here. Here's what was good about it. And if I said to you, what's the worst thing, or what's the worst party you've ever been to? You can go there. But if I said to you, for most of you, tell me about the 30-second party you'd been to in your life, most of you cannot give me an answer to that. And especially when it comes to our internet departments, that is very much so how we're programmed. We remember that customer who was perfect, gave us perfect CSI, did everything we asked them to do. We made a lot of money. I still remember 15, 16, 18 years ago, the customer that came in, we sold them an SS Camaro with silver. It was a $6,000 deal. It was 100% CSI. They took me, the wife and the husband took me to the Outback Steakhouse. I still remember that because that was just a great, unique deal. I also remember the guy that bought the car for invoice less half a holdback and then threatened to send me lots of referrals. I'll let you think about that for a minute. So we remember those unique experiences. So when you're setting policies and procedures and process, sometimes I would encourage you not to plan for or to execute strategies that really are designed around the smaller percentage of your customers. Let's go wide. So I talk about logical next strategy. How are you moving the prospect along? What is the strategy? We believe the golden rule is email, phone, and showroom. Now, we can say that intellectually, you can agree with me intellectually, then my challenge is if I go back in your CRM and say, okay, what are the steps that are supposed to be taking place? What are you doing? How are you communicating? How are you creating that conversion opportunity for the customer? Do you actually have a strategy that is designed to try to move the customer from the email to the phone and then move them to the phone to the showroom? Are we spending a lot of time trying to sell cars through the email? Are we simply trying to sell cars on the phone? This is the large scale aspects of your process. I'm not talking about, again, the one-off, the customer who says, email me or die, right? If you don't email me the information, I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm talking about the hundreds of leads, or those of you that are getting thousands or 1,000, 1,200 leads or more that are coming into some dealerships, depending on their size. How are you creating that strategy process? And is there a break in this idea of email to phone to showroom? Is that the cadence that I would see if I went into your system, along with the first impression factor from the example that we talked about a second ago? Also within the process, what's happening once you get past that initial? Because I know stores that are excellent at that 1 to 7 day customer. You know, the full court press, Corey, we call them 2-3 times a day. We don't leave voicemails. We're hammering them. We're gonna get those buyers in. And their team is very aggressive in the beginning, but of course, as they don't get the callbacks they want, as they don't get people on the phone out of the chute, as people aren't responding, then of course we fall into that future category. And what we know uniquely because of our work with manufacturers, that gives us access to data that a lot of times the average store doesn't have access to. So when we plug into the Polks of the world, the IHSs of the world, the Urban Sciences of the world to connect those dots in the process, we can see those transactions happening, you know, at other dealerships, at other breaks, at other brands. We can see those different factors as they're occurring. So I'm challenging you to really look at that process going into what we look at as week 7 to what we look at as going into that 90-day market, that 90, 120-day. And I understand, oh, Corey, we've got follow-up for 6 months. That's great. The question is, how is it tweaked? How is it designed? What are we saying in that process? What are the gaps between communications? Are we putting people on a 7-day cadence or a 14-day cadence? That's where the opportunities are. But I can tell you for sure, one key area to strengthen and look at how you can strengthen is right in that sweet spot of those customers who are rolling on in that 90-day period. And that doesn't mean just shifting them to the broadcast email and now they get everything. Now they're getting the newsletter they didn't ask for. They're getting the service specials. We looked at a Mercedes shop on a new Mercedes, and 90 days later, we were getting emails about winterizing our car or getting our car ready for summer, coolant checks, things that had nothing to do with it because we treat it as if we have an email, they're in the CRM, let's hit them and hope maybe something happens. So again, I want to challenge you in those areas as it relates to long-term follow-up. You have a benefit that a lot of people don't have, right? Your building doesn't move. You're not a most of you on, any of you probably on this call don't have a pop-up dealership where you're going. So many of you have been in your location for years. Your names have been around for a long time. So you have kind of this idea of being there and creating some level of what marketers call as TOMA, which is top of mind awareness. You have some of that. But of course, now the marketplace being as competitive as it is, it's very easy for a customer to end up in a lead cycle with other dealerships and, you know, a lot of the third parties, I'm not naming any names, but a lot of the third parties when it comes to lead aggregation, competitive choices, these different types of terminologies and actions that many of the lead companies execute that generate interest across the platform for stores. So now sometimes it's the one that follows up the most efficiently and effectively that is put in the position to kind of win the race there. So when I talk about phone strategy, do you understand your points of control? Do you have contingency plans? What am I talking about? Where are the areas in a typical phone call where you have the opportunity to whether gain control or lose control? What's your contingency plan? What do I say or what do I do if the customer does not follow the process I like them to follow? What is the pricing strategy? So it's the 4th of April. So is the pricing strategy, is it a whole gross pricing strategy now? Is it a let's move as many cars as possible strategy now, and then we'll taper off at the end of the month? Is it consistent, or does it change depending on the whims? I recently talked to a dealership where the used car manager has something called a rolling ACV. I've never heard this. I tell you, as long as I'm in the business, I always hear something new. Every time I think I've heard it all. It's a rolling ACV. So he determines the ACV basically after looking at the deal. On the recap, he'll put the ACV on just like basically at his whim, not really scientific, not V-auto. It's all these other factors. So nobody in the deal really knows what's happening until the moment the deal goes to F&I. Obviously, that's such a disaster. But that is a pricing strategy nonetheless. So what is your pricing strategy? What is the purpose of interaction? So what tools will you use? Is there a trade involved? Is it scarcity on the product? Is it new product? What are the conversation points? What's the purpose of the interaction? So high level, I know I recognize some names on here. So I see there's some GMs, some dealers that are on the call as well. High level, I ask a dealer, GM, hey, what do you want from your BDC? What do you want from your internet department? Get them in here. That's very high level, right? So the question is, what's the purpose of the interaction when they're engaged? What's the how-to in that methodology? And is that consistent across the board? Because it's very often I have those conversations also with dealers, and it's, oh, I've got 5 people, and these 2, oh, they're my superstars. These other 3, I don't know. And that's a tough one when you're dealing with high volume, when you're dealing with a high volume of leads, and you're dealing with a high volume of customers. The opportunity for somebody to be turned off is so significant. As an Honda example, they have to be turning off whatever percentage it is. It could be lessened by just paying greater attention, right? So what's the purpose of the interaction? Is this conversation relevant to the individual prospect? So often our follow-up, our messaging is so broad. Oh, great news, I've got some information for you, call me back. It doesn't become particular or unique to that individual prospect. So my question is it just a generic execution of a script, or are there nuances? Is there information you're able to pick up from the information you have available from the customer that can be used that's relevant to that prospect? And that last one just becomes, hey, for scripting and for training from that perspective, what is it? When's the last time that's been updated? I'm going to give you some resources that you can access at the end of this to really take a look at that. I remember being in a dealership recently, and we were in their training room, and they had all these posters on the wall, and the posters had, different quotes, and, it wasn't quite if I could you, would you, but it was just historic quotes that probably everybody has heard at some point. It was a very well-known company that's been around a long time, and we're having this conversation. We've got all these posters, and they're telling me about the training. So I go over to the poster, and I look at the copyright date, and one of the posters' copyright date was 1979. The other one was 1983. So that's the messaging that the salespeople are exposed to every day inside the dealership. Every time they go in that training room, they're reinforcing information copyrighted from 30 years ago. Now, is your customer the same customer as they were 30 years ago? Not human being, not flesh and blood, but information availability, buying skepticism, choice, options, education level. How are all those factors different? And that's what I want you to have consideration for when we talk about that phone strategy as it relates to your process. Do you understand TOMA? I shared the acronym, the extrapolation of the acronym, top of mind awareness. That's what all the major marketers do. So when you start thinking about a hamburger, Burger King, I want you to think of them. When you're thinking about, obviously, buying some sneakers, Nike wants you to think of them. But are you executing a TOMA strategy? Grammar, semantics, as you saw in that example. what was the execution of that message he was trying to get across? And what was the impact potentially on a customer? How would you, on the other side of this call, if you received that autoresponder as a vehicle shopper? And what's amazing is, I will say this, a lot of us, especially if you've been in this business a while, we have to admit, we're a little jaded when it comes to all of this, because our purchase method, whether it's demo, internal to the dealership, the whole purchase strategy is so completely different to the customer. And I remember turning in the keys to my demo a long time ago and having to go and buy a car after never purchasing a car, going straight into the car business and going straight into a demo and really not having to make a car purchase for years after being in the business. So it really is a different scenario and a different mindset. So how is the grammar, how are the semantics coming across? Are you the premier Nissan dealer with the premier with an E at the end of it? Do you know the difference between effective and persuasive communications? So if I looked inside your template library right now, what would you grade your communications to be? Do you know the difference between effective and persuasive? So effective communications explain, persuasive communications sell. And the example I always use for this is, if you go to your mailbox right now, Capital One, somebody's trying to get you to get a credit card, and when you open it up, it's the greatest thing in the world. It's 0% interest for life. We're not going to charge you for anything. We love you. There's no blackout dates. We'll come, clean your house if you ask us to, right? Concierge service. And that's the that's the persuasive part. And then you get the card in the mail, right? It's this big stuffed envelope, and you take the card out, and then there's this piece of paper that drops to the floor like an accordion. That's the effective communications. That's the ones that explain, yeah, that's kind of true what we told you, but here's the real truth, and if you're late, we're coming to get your children. So effective versus persuasive. How are your communications now? What is your communication strategy in store? If I became a lead in your system, what emails will I get from you over what period of time? What will they say? When's the last time you looked at it, adjusted it? Because so many people treat this like a Ron Popeil. If you know Ron Popeil invented the rotisserie chicken. So if you're ever up at 3 in the morning and you need to buy rotisserie chicken, you'll know that one of the phrases, I think I just read an article that he's following to go public, but he coined the phrase, set it and forget it. And that's how a lot of us have treated our processes. We created a process, we put it in whatever year we did, and nobody's really looked at it. So our templates are our templates from 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Our process program in the CRM, because it was a workout to do it. Nobody wants to go back and try to rework it. But for most of us, there's an opportunity there. So again, I asked the question, is there a pricing strategy in your email? Are your emails relevant? Like I said, are we just simply putting customers who are out of our 30-day cycle or 60-day cycle, did we just put them on the newsletter? So now they're getting information about car care, car maintenance, what the barbecue for July, or are we still communicating with them in a relevant strategy, with a relevant strategy? And is there a clear direction? Okay, so that was still number one. Let me just finish number one. So you can see the idea of a broken process has many moving parts to it, whether it's initial communication, as we talked about in the opening, or the bridge point, and that sweet spot between when we need to do a little bit more to stretch ourselves in terms of our follow-up, and then really examining and going back and thinking. Because here's the reality. Our hour together, my goal is to give you some information and get you thinking, get you going back to work through, look for areas, look for gaps. Because at the end of the day, my overall philosophy has always been this. What we're looking for is incremental and sustainable growth. Any of you right now can throw a tent sale, a liquidation mailer. You can blow out a few cars on a weekend, cook some hot dogs, put some 800-pound gorillas up, and have this, maybe have this injection of deals. But at the end of the day, the business will normalize again. So my ask for you is that we work on doing things that create incremental growth. As an owner, as a GM, as a GSM, as a leader of people in a store, right? If you've got 12, 13 salespeople, and all of a sudden or an internet department. I'm an internet director. I've got 5 people on my team, and all of a sudden, each of them starts selling 3 more cars or 4 more cars a month. Now that growth is exponential. If as a salesperson you do that same thing, there's a lot that can happen there as well in terms of bonuses and other pay structures and pay plans that you can continue to leverage. So I need to get that incremental growth, and then I need to make that sustainable, and then I need to grow again. So that's my hope here. Number 2, as we move forward, it's also going to be not knowing thy customer. This is such a significant area because we spend a lot of time getting tunnel vision. And when we think about some of the basis of buyer psychology, right, we've got people who, why do they come to the internet? Why are they leads? Previous bad experience, and now they're hiding. A guy in Texas, he gave me, I borrowed the phrase from him, internet tough guy. So now they're hiding. You know, some of the things that happen if you're new in the business, some of the stuff maybe you've heard about or never heard about, you know, trade keys on the roof, people calling 911 because they can't leave the F&I office. I mean, all this kind of stuff happens. So people had previous bad experiences. There's some people out there that they know their laydowns. That's a term we use, right? They know their laydowns. They know what happens. You're going to come in there and get coloring books for the kids, and you've got popcorn and music playing, and you're banging a gong every time somebody buys. You're going to create this environment, right, that now they must buy. They feel committed to buy. Most salespeople are laydowns in other parts of their other parts of their lives. Customers want to be in control. Genuine customers, they want to be in control. People are very busy, right? People also live an internet lifestyle. I travel. Hotels still, many of the hotels still will give you your choice, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, what have you. So you go outside your hotel room, you open the door, you look down, there's a USA Today. Now you pick it up because it seems like it's the right thing to do, but when will you ever read it? What you might do, you might have a subscription to USA Today on your iPad or one of those other non-Apple devices I won't mention. But you may have that, right? And you may read that information on your device later. So again, people live an internet lifestyle. I laugh when I go to check out somewhere and they ask me for my home phone number. I have no idea why they do that. Because obviously, for most of us, right, anybody calling you at home, it better be a 5-alarm emergency, but for the most part, they probably don't know you if your home phone is ringing. Some people on this call right now probably go, home phone, what is that, Corey? They don't even have one. So this overall psychology about why people come, convenience, these other factors, is not always derived around our vision of the grinder or the person looking to steal a car or these different factors. And I think the quicker your teams are able to address that and identify that, and to kind of go a step further, when we talk about these buyer personalities, can you identify them? Can you understand, you know, has three children, business professional, hectic schedule, doesn't trust car dealerships. I want to know that you're remembering after the sale. I'm used to being in control. So what I find very often is the greatest opportunity for growth, or one of the greatest opportunities for growth inside that bubble, is when your team members, you as an individual, if you're talking to customers directly, or your team members or the people you lead as dealers, owners, and managers on this call, your growth comes from your team's ability to get outside their own comfort zone, right, and to understand how to strategically communicate to these quadrant of buyers. Now, I'm not talking about mirroring to the extent of being disingenuous. I do an exercise in our live workshops where I ask people what their interests are, and I just simply act like those are the greatest interests in the world, and I'm interested in them. And people get it. Obviously, I'm overtly disingenuous in the example, but I'm not talking about mirroring. I remember a guy came up to me. We had a 70-person session for a dealer group in Texas, and the guy came up to me afterwards, and he said, hey, you know, I do some internal training for the group here. I want you to check out my CD. And he hands me a CD, and on the cover, it's him wearing a 10-gallon hat with a piece of tumbleweed coming out of his mouth, and the topic is, on the cover, all salespeople are just great actors. And I thought, how tragic. Because we're in such a marketplace now that is rewarding authenticity, that's craving authenticity. Where's your customer's BS meter if you were to hold your hand out right in front of you right now? Would you put your hand high or would you put it low? So that's the great tragedy. But your people have the ability to sell more cars right now. The quicker they can understand who they have in front of them, and then make the tactical, strategic adjustments, the adjustments that are based on personality, not mirroring or not faking interest with the customer, but understanding tactically what some of those cues are to identify and then build that bridge to close the deal with those type of customers. So knowing that customer is going to be so important. How does your team fare when it comes to getting outside of their individual comfort zone with different customers? I always ask managers this in our live workshops. I'll say, hey, have you ever had a salesperson, or I'm sorry, have you ever had a customer come up to you and say that salesperson was pushy? And most of them will say, yeah, at some point in their career, if they've been a manager for a while, yeah, I have. And my response is, it wasn't that the salesperson was pushy. It was that the salesperson didn't understand the needs of the customer in front of them. So what's your team's ability to better engage outside of their immediate comfort zone? They do very, very well with the people who fit inside their box. The key for this here is to remember that the head is attached to the price. Why do I say this? I don't say this because maybe it's not revolutionary for you. I say it because many salespeople, as I observe, talk very analytically to customers. They have analytical conversations. They ask customers about thought, and that creates barriers. Because when you ask someone, what do you think about those numbers? What do you think about the car? What do you think about the test drive? All of those overriding factors drive back to their ability to think analytically, which does not help you engage them emotionally. We all would agree getting people emotionally involved is important. Yet many of your people, if I look at your scripts, or we listen to phone calls all over the country and in Canada, and yeah, I was going to think not Mexico yet, but I'm the translator for that. But we listen to calls all over the place, and we hear all of these analytical questions and analytical answers. But in reality, the heart is attached to the wallet. Knowing and execution are two different things. Oh, well, Cory, I know we definitely need to get people emotionally involved. I know that. Okay, great. What's the execution? How do you execute a heart is attached to the wallet strategy, or how are you executing that in the store? Because that's not what I hear on the telephone or what I read in the email. So what's your strategy for executing a heart is attached to the wallet? Okay, number 3, and then we'll wrap up. And if there's questions, I will gladly take them. So number 3 is trying to leverage what I call intangible benefits. So amazingly, I've been talking about the topic of a why buy, or a unique selling proposition, or whatever you like to call it. I've been talking about it for going on 13 years now. Still, I find stores who can't deliver on the promise to a customer of why they should actually be doing business there. And then the next step to being able to say, okay, raise your hand and say, hey, we have this, why buy? The next step is now to ask yourself, is it tangible or is it intangible? So I'm going to share with you some I'm visually sharing with you intangibles, and then I'll verbally just give you an overriding kind of point to what a tangible should be and what you need to be thinking about as far as tangibles is concerned. So when I talk about intangibles, what am I talking about? I'm talking about things that, make no mistake, your family owned operated, you've been in business 60 years, 50 years, be proud of all those things. But the question you must ask yourself is, what is the impact on the customer? What is the impact on their buying decision? Family owned and operated. The majority of car dealers in America are still family owned and operated. We've been in business for 50 years. Many dealerships are legacy and have been in business for a long time. Where's the impact? If family-owned and operated and time in business was the overriding factor, then obviously Walmarts and superstores of any kind would not have penetrated. I could still go buy my Sony TV from Gary at Gary's Electronics on the corner instead of Best Buy. But that's not the reality. So where's the challenge? We talk to customers when we're in dealerships. We talk to customers who come out of the F&I office. We talk to them about, purchase experience, customer experience. I've never in that history of doing that in the last decade had a customer say to me, you know what, Cory? I tell you, we were on the fence. We were really on the fence about buying this car. And then I looked in the corner of the dealership and I saw that President's Award. And I just knew that was the reason. I knew that we had to buy from this place. Again, be proud of it. I'm not taking anything away from your accomplishments. But are those things impacting? In this example, you should buy from them because they're knowledgeable. As opposed to what? Not being knowledgeable? We have a huge selection. As opposed to what? Not having a huge selection. Easy, fast process. How many of you have ever pitched quick, easy, and convenient, easiest buying experience you're ever going to have, Mr. Customer, in your dealership, and you've given them vouchers to Applebee's because F&I is backed up for 3 hours? I know there's somebody in this call right now that knows exactly what I am talking about. So these become intangibles. How do you serve that up to a customer? Well, we've been here. Oh, great. The dealership down the street's been here. Oh, we're one of the oldest dealerships. Fantastic. How does that impact me? How is that a buying advantage? Because we're unique in our industry, right? We're the only industry where everybody can be number one and nobody's suing the other person. I want you to think about that for a second. So think about where you live, the geography of where you live. I'm looking on the call. I'm scanning the attendee list real quick. So just imagine, Jersey's in the house. So just imagine we're the only industry, right? Where let's take New Jersey for a moment. Let's take the New Jersey Turnpike. New Jersey Turnpike has billboards. We're the only industry where you can drive down the northbound lanes of the Turnpike, look at billboards to your right, and see a Honda dealer with a billboard that says we're number one, and then go southbound on the New Jersey Turnpike and then see a dealer that's also a Honda dealer going, no, we're number one. Nobody says only 88.7% of our customers liked us last month. Now, we all know if Pepsi ran an ad right now and said more people drink Pepsi in New Jersey than Coke, and they didn't have the data and statistics to back it up, Coca-Cola would be suing them right away. But see, we get to do all of that, and that equalizes the marketplace. So number one, best selection. Nobody sells them for less. 6 acres of property. Those are not impact points. Those are intangibles. I guarantee the large percentage of you on this call, if I went on your websites, if you had a why buy, let me give you credit, because normally the more progressive thinking people show up for whether it's free webinars or paid training or workshops. So let's just assume, all right, yeah, we've got a why buy going. Now the next phase is what percentage is tangible versus intangible. And for most of you, I'm going to guarantee there's something about family origin, there's something about years in business, there's something about something that is based on size. So size of the dealership, size of the inventory, some factor, approval, our ability to work with a bunch of banks. There's going to be something in that ecosphere that are going to be those things. So I'm challenging you on that. I'm challenging you to start thinking about more tangible. What are tangible takeaways that these deals offer? What's something tangible that you can do there? Are there state inspections? Do you have a car wash attached to the dealership? Do you have, is there something that you can pre-discount? Like, I love warranties. When we talk about warranties, right? We'll pitch an F&I. We'll pitch a discount on the warranty if they buy it now, when we know that, of course, you can sell them in a warranty at any point in time that they're in their factory, that they're still in factory coverage. So why couldn't we extend that? Which also, of course, means a transaction. So what is it that you offer uniquely already? What's in the parts department? What's in the parts department sitting that nobody wanted to buy that you're stuck with? Was it a USB keychain? Was it some hat nobody wanted and somebody thought it a great idea to order 100 of them? What could you create? And the key here is got to be packaged. We love packages. We love good, better, best. We love platinum, gold, silver. We love all of those fasteners. So we love to order by number, and we love something called the performance package, the VIP package. Because it becomes so powerful now in your market, because now I can answer that phone, and before I get into inventory and price, I can talk about my value proposition. When somebody hits the lot and I give them my spiel, what brings them in today, and they tell me what they're looking at or how they're not looking, I can share value. We've heard, right? Value is important. Value sells. We've heard that for 30 years, but often we only say that. We don't actually show it. Or people who talk about it don't go, well, how do I do it? Oh, people buy from people they like, respect, and trust. They have to like you. Well, where is that factor? So this is a great entity and a great idea once you master it. And somebody can walk away with an actual differentiator. And it doesn't matter if the dealership down the street can do everything that you can do or are offering. They don't have it packaged. Early on in my career, I worked for General Motors. Not General Motors, the company, but a General Motors dealer. And we had this benefits package. And this benefits package, I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I didn't know any better. It had a 3-day, 150-mile money-back guarantee. It had fixed right the first time, lifetime replacement on parts and labor, and it had a couple other things in it. And I would tout it and push it, and people were impressed by it, and it would help. And then one day, I had some free time, and I was reading the owner's manual of a GM, of a Chevy. And the third page on the owner's manual said, all GM vehicles have a 3-day, 150-mile money-back guarantee. And then one day I went downstairs to the service department, and I looked up on the board, and it said, GM Goodwrench, fixed right the first time, lifetime guarantee on parts and labor. And I realized all the things that we were offering, many of them, 80% of them, some were some key replacements, some other things, but most of the things we were offering were things that were offered. The difference was, other dealers weren't talking about them, and other dealers hadn't packaged it. So we were able to deliver the message as a package, as a differentiator, to at least get people thinking, to at least get people saying, even if price dollar for dollar was the same, now there's something that we're going the extra mile on. So really want you to think about that, especially it's so competitive out there in the marketplace right now. Even if you're leading in your market on this call right now, it's still so competitive. There's still more deals you could be taking. And the question is, are you a leader right now because you're doing everything right, or because the dealer that you're competing against has not, quote unquote, necessarily woken up yet? I think that's an important factor to consider. So here's what I would encourage you to do. Encourage you to think about taking action. Practicality causes delay, emotion causes action. Ultimately, your impact will drive your income. Average performers plan what to say, top performers plan what to ask. Eliminate or differentiate yourself from the competition. Those are ultimately the goals that I think that we're all after. And understand that you can't mandate productivity. One of my favorite, Steve Jobs, I mean, obviously he's got a ton of quotes over his career, but one of my favorite quotes when it comes to employees, management, leadership is, you can't mandate productivity. It's an organization's responsibility to give its team the tools they need to be effective. And I also ask you to make sure you're focusing on the presentation. First impressions matter, second impressions matter, third impressions matter. It all matters all the way through the process. There's such this, I call it a revival, because it almost seems like people used to care and nobody cares anymore. But there's a revival revolving around customer experience. Every manufacturer that I know, I just got an email yesterday regarding a launch from a Japanese manufacturer regarding some information about getting involved in a customer experience program, because they're all involved. They all see the writings on the wall. They all see the statistics that customer experience will overtake price, will overtake any of these factors, these other buying decision factors that are out there now. And it's so, so important. So focusing on the presentation, how your teams are presenting themselves to customers, understanding and asking yourself, are your strategies right now customer focused or dealer focused? Were they designed to be the best for you or the best for your customer? I want to give you a couple of resources if you don't have them. As I said, I recognize a few people on the call, so you guys may have this, these guides already, but, and thank you for tuning back in. But I invite you to go to our website, mosleyautomotive.com. You can go straight there, /free /downloads, or you can just go to the word that says downloads, free downloads, in the drop-down menu. And there's 2 docs that you can download. One is something we call an Internet Sales Rapid Assessment. It's a quick 10-sheeter. Just gets you started thinking about your process. I want you to visually see, hey, when's the last time we've engaged? What are some of our percentages in our communications? Some of these different factors. And then the next one is our principle that we train based off of and educate based off is something called the 7 Disciplines of Internet Sales Success. So this is a little workbook, a little kind of do-it-yourself self-workbook that you can utilize as it relates to that. So those are 2 downloads I'd invite you to go ahead and grab. And what we'll do is the first 15 people that do the download, I will make available to them. I'll make available to them one of our copy of our book, one of our teas, or one of our mugs that we have. So I'll make that available to the first 5 people who download that. So I'm opening it up for questions now. Brian?
Yes, Cory. Yeah, everybody. This is Brian Ankney. Cory, great presentation.
Thank you.
Actually, we've got some good questions, and we've got some really good questions for you. I'd like to remind everybody, if you haven't entered in your questions yet, please do now. Cory, the first question I have for you today is, do you have a recommendation on software to use to map our lead process?
So what I would say is there are, and we've used some stuff in the past, like there's some, what is that software called? It's mind mapping software. I think it's by a company called Mindster, I think is their name. But I will tell you that, because that has like the WYSIWYGs and you kind of connect all the dots. I'll tell you one of the things that we do internally here is we do a combination of things. Number one is we have a big whiteboard, and then we have our 3M, the tear sheets, and we will take a process that we'll lay those sheets out across the room, and then we'll just start connecting those dots. Almost think of it like a sales funnel or an engagement funnel, and we'll simply just get down visually and take that whole room if we need to and lay it out. So there's some software. I'm a little, as new school as I am, there's just some things I like to touch and visually like to see, and I feel that sometimes the software takes longer to get it all stuff worked out visually than it is to just go ahead and do it. The other thing I know, I'm an Apple guy, but I know on the PC side, a lot of people and a lot of the OEMs use Visio as a piece of software that allows you to create those kind of mind maps and kind of those connecting the dots. But we like some good old-fashioned sticky boards that go on the walls that we can really just sit down and go, A goes to B, B goes to C, C goes to D, and then look at that visually and then go program it.
Okay. Our next question is, could you expand on the heart is attached to the wallet?
Sure. So basically the point there is I'm asking you to start to look at the way you communicate and the questions that you ask the customer. Are they derived around the idea of analytical thinking? Do they trigger analytical thoughts or do they trigger emotional thoughts? An example would be, customer completes a test drive. Most salespeople will say, what did you think? That is a direct correlation that commands a customer to go into their brain and process the question to give you an answer that is purely analytical. You come back and you present numbers. What do you think about these numbers? Oh, no, they're too high. You've commanded the customer, and this is psychology. So you've commanded the customer to now engage you analytically. Take that same example when we talk about the heart. It's very, very simple. How did the car feel to you? How did you feel on that test drive? How do you feel about these numbers? What I want to do is I want to keep activating anything that's emotional. Oh, well, I feel it's a little high, but I think we could get there. Are you and you've heard the idea of creating an emotional experience for your customer. So now I want to just take that a step further and go deeper than most people go in thinking when they say, hey, get them emotionally involved. Get them to touch it, taste it, feel the wheel, right? We've heard that terminology. So your word choice is going to be important as a result of that. And that's kind of what I mean. Or not kind of, that's what I mean.
All right. I don't normally share the name of the person that asked the question, but Ron and Amarillo put it into the question. So I'm guessing that maybe Ron and you know each other, Corey.
Yeah, very well. my new
Okay.
BFF.
Okay. And his question for you is, how do you get BDC reps and internet salespeople to use phone scripts or word tracks to know what to say to a customer on incoming calls and internet leads that come in? That's from Ron and Amarillo.
Okay, Ron, I gotta process this. Gotta process that question again. BDC reps didn't necessarily use phone scripts or word tracks to know what to say to a customer on incoming calls. Well, how do you get them to do it? Well, I mean, from a certain extent, and again, I don't want to sound, I don't want to sound, too rough here, but anybody who comes into a job has a job description. If that job description is to execute a script and execute word tracks that we put, assuming that they've been trained properly, the drills are being done. And again, because Ron's asking this question, I'm gonna say yes, he's working on that. But at the end of the day, employees and team members fall into a couple key categories, and that's coachable, or I should say, that's trainable, coachable, replaceable. So at some point, if you're not getting those results when people are executing, if people are blatantly not executing the strategy, well, you have to reevaluate their employment at its core. Again, assuming you're doing that job. So if I've introduced the concept to you, I've given you examples of the concept, I've helped activate you and given you, empowered you to execute, and you're just like, I'm not going to do this, because that's the only thing that be happening. It's one thing if they're trying to execute and not doing well at it, or they're trying, but that's different, because now you need to get involved in coaching them and looking at where the breakdown. Are they uncomfortable? If they're uncomfortable, why? I've always trained based on the theory that you have to explain the why if you really want people to execute. It's very easy to come in and say, hey, do this, and then, that's it. Then they do it or don't do it. But they have to understand the why. I think if they understand the why in a lot of instances, it really leads to them being effective. But like I said, if you're training on it and you have an actionable training plan to work with them, to role play, to extend the why and not just, do it, and you've covered that basis and you've coached on that, and they're simply not doing their job, well, what happens to people who don't do their job? You're going to certainly have to make decisions at that point. Brian, Delusion? Hello.
Sorry,
Yes,
sorry about that.
Oh, okay.
I accidentally hit mute. Whoops.
Okay.
Sorry. It
You're
looks
dangerous.
like you served Ron's. Yeah, you served Ron's purpose. He said thank you. And then it looks like maybe another friend of yours, Brian, says, great presentation today, Corey. I know it's not a question, but an earned comment. And
hey, thank you very
actually,
much.
I have another. Yeah, I got another question for you. How do you see text working out in BDCs?
Text messaging?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Text messaging.
Text messaging. So we're looking at some phenomenal data right now on text messaging. To me, text messaging, well, compliance is key. The biggest mistake people are making, and it's only because the news is not covering it and the attorneys general haven't really started hammering people, but this idea of salespeople texting customers from their phone or texting prospects without the opt-in, without the compliance, somebody's going to be writing big checks soon enough. So I can't urge you enough. Every major CRM that I know of has some opt-in chat platform, but text has some opt-in text platform. Texting to me is right now where chat was years ago, where chat came on the scene, and the biggest mistake that a lot of people made with chat was they tried to do it internally, and they didn't. It wasn't managed quickly, timely. People type how they talk. So those were all the challenges. There wasn't a finesse factor or an executed strategy. It was, whoever next was up got the ping. They got on the chat, and oh yeah, we got that car. When can you come in? And hey, hold on a second, let me take a look. It wasn't a strategy. So texting is the same issue right now. And there are a couple companies that we're looking at very closely that are managing that service for customers. That texting is going to be very key because of deliverability, because the immediacy of interacting with a customer, but you still need to execute a sales strategy in terms of what you say as you would on the phone, as you would on a chat. It's going to be very, very powerful and useful, but I caution people to simply just go text crazy in terms of doing that, because text messaging as a whole is a very rapport-driven thing. So you and I text, I'll text a buddy, right? We're very casual about it. So most of us don't have any training on strategic text messaging to create appointments or to create car deals or to work with customers. We go back to the rapport base, where we're communicating the way we might communicate with a friend, and that can be a mistake early on before you actually have that rapport with the customer. But texting is going to be huge.
All right. Well, it looks like that's our last question, Cory. I'd like to thank Cory Mosley for taking the time to join us today, and I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for taking the time to join us. If you liked what you saw today on this AutoSuccess webinar, I invite you to invite friends to future AutoSuccess webinars. And if there's something on this AutoSuccess webinar that you feel somebody else in your dealership needs to see, you will get an email from me thanking you for attending. And just reply, and I'll forward that to Cory, and then Cory will send you the recording of this webinar. So if there's somebody else in the dealership that needs to hear it from Cory's mouth and not just from yours, please, send us an email, and I'll send you the recording, or I'll send it to Cory, who will send you the recording. And if you haven't joined AutoSuccess webinars, do it. And if you have a topic or a person you'd love to see on here, you can reply to the email that you get from me. That's my real email address. And this is Brian Ankney. It's brian@autosuccessonline.com. Just reply to that with what you'd like to see, or go to AutoSuccess webinars, message me. I thank you all for coming. Cory, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we let them go today?
No, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank you guys for taking the time to attend. I know how tough it is in the middle of the day to break away, so we wanted to try to deliver some value. I see downloads coming in, which is awesome. So a lot of guys are going to be picking up a few things from us here. So thanks again. Thank you, Brian, for hosting me, and for everybody at AutoSuccess. Congratulations on the next level that you're going into, and I hope to be back soon.
You got it. Well, thank you. Everybody have a great day. Goodbye.